The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 172, which is being recorded outdoors during our first heatwave of the year, in which we will be looking at the first 10 minutes of the 2018 Netflix version of Watership Down. First though, among the YouTube comments on last week's episode was one from Stephen Orr, who informs me that there is apparently a German-produced DVD version of the Netflix series that also includes the English soundtrack that is available online. I have found copies available on eBay by searching the German name for Watership Down, Unten am Fluss, which means down by the river. It would be fascinating to know how they came up with that title in Germany. Next, last week I accidentally named the actor who plays Cowslip as Roy Kinnear. Of course, Roy Kinnear, who died in 1988, played Pipkin in the 1978 film. Cowslip, in this version, is played by his son, Rory Kinnear. All the other details I gave were correct, and my apologies for the error. Anyway, let's start looking at this version of Watership Down. Netflix miniseries Episode 1, Part 1. Fiver's Warning. Part 1 of Episode 1, The Journey, runs from the beginning of the episode to exactly 10 minutes, and the reverse timings are 50 minutes 10 to 40 minutes 10. The equivalent chapters from the book are chapters 1 to 3, The Notice Board, The Chief Rabbit, and Hazel's Decision. I've always counted the 1978 film of Watership Down as canon for a reason that becomes clear from the very start of this miniseries. It follows a convention established by the 1978 film that was partly followed by the 1999 to 2001 TV series of opening with the story of the blessing of El Herrera, only told in a style that is not as natural looking as the portrayal of the main story. Here, that tale is told to the accompaniment of piano music in the style of highly complex 19th century shadow puppetry. It is beautiful to watch and very effective, as El Herrera's newly enhanced physical abilities are swapped in front of us by the switching of parts of his body. Tellingly, the geographical ambiguity of this version of Watership Down is indicated by the inclusion of a wolf as one of the Allil. Wolves have not been native to Britain since the 18th century. El Herrera's bottom being blessed happens because of the first change to the original story, which is quite a modern touch. Rather than his bottom being blessed because El Herrera is too afraid to show himself, here he presents his bottom to Frith as a gesture of disrespect, basically saying, "Bless this." This is one change that works quite well, I suppose, in storytelling terms. But it is also a portent of the way the story will be treated as it is adapted for a modern audience. And that word adapted is very much in quotation marks. As the story ends and Frith makes his promise, we see El Herrera run across the face of the full moon, and the episode title is displayed. And now a complete change of tone, as our viewpoint is that of our camera flying along the brook that runs by Sandalford Warren. It swoops under a small bridge before reaching the warren, and Hazel, who is running and calling out for his brother Fiver. The landscape is very open, and the holes of Sandalford Warren are unconcealed by undergrowth. Hazel greets some young rabbits, whose response tells us this is Hazel. He passes Hawkbit and Dandelion, who will be a double act in this version as well. Hawkbit is wondering if there will be a lot of those out at evening Silflay. Dandelion is clearly exasperated by his friend's desire for female company. Hazel reaches the entrance to a run and looks over the landscape before entering. As he moves along the run, we encounter a second comedy pairing, Blackberry and Bluebell. Blackberry is indicating his intelligence by explaining how to calculate seasons by light values, and Bluebell is indicating his complete lack of interest. Thus, Blackberry, the most intelligent rabbit in Watership Down, is signalled as being a bit of a geek, a denigration of intelligence that is a very unfortunate modern cultural phenomenon. Hazel finds Fiver asleep in his burrow, and it is a very disturbed sleep. Suddenly we are in Fiver's dream, in what I think is one of the most visually impressive CGI sequences of this version. Fiver is moving through Sandalford Warren in a frozen moment of time. The periphery of the screen is distorted and out of focus. That frozen moment of time is the beginning of the destruction of Sandalford Warren. Rabbits are frozen in moments of panic. Earth falling from the roof of the run is frozen in midair. We see one rabbit apparently dead or unconscious. Fiver reaches the entrance to the run as we hear Hazel's voice intruding into his dream. The scene is unfrozen for a terrifying moment as Fiver goes to move outside with another rabbit, and a human digger bucket violently fills the screen and pours the earth it has dug away. Fiver opens his eyes in shock. Hazel reassures him that he was having one of his nightmares. Fiver seems to accept this, as this is obviously quite normal, but this one was clearly stranger than usual. Hazel suggests they get something to eat. He has seen some sow thistle by the stream. But Fiver tries to tell him that his dream seems to indicate that something is coming to Sandalford. Captain Holly was in his dream. Hazel says Captain Holly can look after himself. They apparently pass him, and Hazel acts submissively before commenting that the Owlsley usually manage to. Hazel is distracted from what Fiver is saying as he spots the doe Dewdrop with two other does. She is clearly Hazel's romantic interest, another innovation in this series, and she asks her companions if he is looking at her in a way that seems like a scene from a Lapine secondary or high school. Now, here I'm going to compliment this version of Watership Down for addressing the arguably unrealistic lack of reference to finding mates in the original novel, where barely 5 minutes in and we have already encountered 2 examples of male rabbits having does very much on their minds. These are, after all, rabbits. Hazel and Fiver cross the stream and find the sow thistle, which replaces the cowslips of the book. And then 2 Owlsley members turn up, one of whom I think is Holly. They remind the 2 outskirters of the rules and laugh cruelly as they move away. This laughter is an addition from the book, where there was just an implied threat. It transforms Sandalford from a warren in which there is just an overbearing Owlsler into one in which there seems to be active corruption. As Hazel and Fiver move away from this confrontation, Hazel is already speculating about leaving the warren, unlike in the book, where he says he won't treat outskirters that way if he gets into the Owlsler, though he does mention getting out altogether. But they have now arrived at the notice board, which Fiver ignores. It is a modern-looking notice board with an appealing-looking image of the suburban dream. Fiver stares out over the landscape and tells Hazel this is where the thing from his dream came from. We see the hillside in the sunset reflected in his eye, and red spreading over it from the direction of the sun. The moment isn't sensationalised, in fact rather like the 2016 radio play, it is just a confirmation of the terror Fiver has felt in his dream. Hazel looks at his brother, and at the hillside he is staring at, in confusion, and then the moment is gone. Fiver tells Hazel something awful is coming. They need to warn everyone. Hazel points out that they are outskirters whom no one listens to. Fiver says they must be made to listen. Cut to Bigwig. And this is really where the criticism of character starts for me in this version. In the book, Bigwig, the Owlsler member, is polite to the 2 outskirters. Here, his first words to Hazel are, "Go away." The wig of his name is a realistic small tuft on his head, but once again, in terms of his character, they've got him wrong again. This Bigwig is a bully and a bit of a thug. Way back in episode 15 of this podcast, I discussed the character of Bigwig and touched on how unfortunate this portrayal of him is. To be fair to John Boyega, he plays to the script he is given, but the fact that a thuggish Bigwig is portrayed by a talented black actor, and yes, I just went there, is unfortunate. Having been persuaded to let Hazel and Fiver see the Thrayarah by Hazel's innate confidence, Bigwig says he will come looking for Hazel if he gets his head bitten off, his expression of worry from the book being turned into a threat. Bigwig's original language from the book does seem a little old-fashioned now, but there were more modern ways of having him express himself in a way that retained his original character. Bigwig had been chewing food as he talked with Hazel, and this motif, which seems authentic in a story about rabbits, is now extended in a nice touch, as the voice actor Tom Wilkinson seems to have been chewing some kind of salad throughout his performance. He even speaks with his mouth full at times. The meeting goes as it usually does in portrayals of Watership Down, except that Fiver outstays his welcome by shouting at the Thrayarah rather than having his panic attack. This Thrayarah has not even tried to be polite, and has had his back to them the entire time as he munches at a bed of salad leaves that surround him. Fiver's shout is heard above ground, and the Thrayarah calls for Bigwig angrily. We hear the beginning of Bigwig getting his head bitten off. Back above ground, Fiver tells Hazel they have to leave. Hazel is persuaded, and his leadership effectively begins. He tells Fiver they have to warn as many other rabbits as they can, but they have to make sure the Owsla don't get wind of what they are doing. Hazel first approaches Bluebell and Blackberry. Meanwhile, Fiver approaches 3 unnamed rabbits who do not speak. Returning to Bluebell and Blackberry, we are treated to the first comedy moment of this version, as the geeky Blackberry of this betrayal gets flustered by what Hazel has just told them and talks of Fiver having taken firm stock of such a portent. However, this version of Bluebell seems to have been changed from a joker to a straight talker. He cuts across Blackberry by summing up with the words, "We're in." Comparison with the book. The Blessing of Alakara is well told in this version, even though its placing follows the 1978 film rather than the book, and although the order of events around when Fiver realises a danger is coming is changed here, his nightmare is very visually effective and gives us an early taste of what CGI is capable of. Fiver's revelation at the notice board is a little underplayed perhaps, and the early introduction of the less likeable bigwig probably begins the process of putting book purists off this version early. The Thrayara is well portrayed, if also a little less polite than in the book, and the incident with Bluebell and Blackberry that ends this segment signals that this retelling will very much be catering to the perceived tastes of a modern streaming audience whose interest has to be maintained, as it is so much easier to switch to watching something else these days. Overall, in its own terms, an effective bit of storytelling, but one that originalists will already find themselves having doubts about. Next time, the journey to a new home begins, and we arrive at the first significant plot change aimed at a modern audience.